We work with students on Saturdays to give them more time on task, and ultimately support a school getting more and more kids earning advanced placement qualifying scores. So it's advanced placement that we build our surround, not Common Core. And then last but not least, absolutely, it is not legal in this state, it has nothing to do with higher education. I am thrilled that we have the Texas Essential Knowledge and Skills Test, and I will support what my state has as standards. The last thing I would say is public education, 90% of its funds come from either local municipalities or state government. It is the state's right to create standards. States working with local governments create the curriculum. I respect that, and I will live by that.
Thank you. Members, questions for the nominee? You ready to answer? Senator Martinez. Oh, Senator Martinez, you have.
Okay, sorry. Thank you. Hi, how are you? Good to see you again. Thank you for being here. Just a couple of questions, because Chairman Birdwell did actually ask a lot of the questions that I have here, so satisfied with the answers that you gave him. Question I have is here, in the Fisher versus UT case, you signed an amicus brief in support of race-based admissions at UT. Were you made aware of the secret admissions program described in the Kroll Associates report before you signed on to the brief?
No.
As Undersecretary of Education, one of your first acts was to forgive the student loan company Nelnet after auditors found they had overcharged the federal government by $278 million. How do you justify that decision?
As I mentioned to Senator Taylor when we met, there are certain things that I can and cannot say when we leave service, but here are the things that are public that I can say. Number one, there was a loophole in the law. When regulations were created around how, in essence, loans were run through the federal government, the regulations left a loophole. The loophole was wide open. Every time a loophole was used by a lender, there was correspondence before and after it was used. My first meeting with the Inspector General was to get briefed on the usage of that. My second meeting was with counsel to understand how vulnerable we were as a department given all of the correspondence that took place before and after. I was assured by counsel that the taxpayer would be burdened if we took this any further, because we might be liable for an even greater if the lending companies sue. So I made the decision that I thought the important thing is to stop this practice, to stop it now, and to close that loophole. So three things that happened after I made that decision. Number one, we avoided litigation, and so we avoided taxpayer money where we probably would have had to pay. Number two, I replaced all leadership in both federal student aid and in the Office of Post-Secondary Education, so that regulations could be written that would close that loophole. And then the third thing I'd like to share with you is inspectors general, when an agency does not go with their recommendation, have lots of recourse. Our inspector general chose not to take any additional recourse based on the totality of the information that he saw at the end of my decision.
Excellent. Thank you, Ms. Tucker. That's all, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Taylor. You have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Martinez, thank you for, I'm sorry, Mrs. Tucker.
Mrs. Tucker.
Thank you for being here. So going into legislative, what does legislative intent mean to you?
I can't help but connect it with the question you asked for each case. And so, to me, legislative intent is the will of elected officials before it becomes law.
Okay. And so, do you recognize that this legislature is a proxy for the will of the people?
Absolutely.
Okay. And you've said this already, I just want to be clear. You recognize that the University of Texas system was created by the people of Texas through their legislature, funded by it. And I guess I can throw in a little Aggie joke here. So do you know why the PUF is 2/3 for the University of Texas and 1/3 for Texas A&M?
I don't know.
The Aggies got to pick first. Just throw that out there. You know?
I wish I could say something, but I'm not.
Well done, well
I
done.
could have some problems I can tell them, I'm sure. So shifting over into the law, would you rather violate the law or quit?
Quit.
Okay, that's good. Unfortunately, some people have been put in that circumstance. I hope that we never put you in that circumstance, but it's important to hear that from you. What do you see as opportunities for improvement in the University of Texas system? Like, I mean, I realize you're coming into something that you don't know terribly well, but what do you think you want to work on over the next 6 years?
I mentioned a couple of these earlier when Chairman Birdwell asked me some questions. I'm not saying this about the University of Texas system because I haven't had a chance to work intricately within, but one of the things that was stunning to me when I first started working in higher ed was how much of a not invented here mentality existed and the inability to learn from others. And so my focuses are very much like Regent Hicks: increased access, better affordability, transparency, and accountability. Are we doing the best that we can? And so benchmarking to me, you mentioned the graduation rate, and when I see a 52%, I don't get excited by the number, but I get excited by the possibility. 52% tells me we have a range, a much broader range that makes that up. What is it that some of our lower range performers can learn from the upper range? Internally, within our own state, internally within our own systems. And so if you've got the top performers, what is it that they can learn from their peer institutions across the United States to get better at graduation rates? So one of the things that I hope to do in the next 6 years is open our eyes to the possibility of learning from best in class and seeing what we can do to improve what we're doing to get a better return on investment to the Texas taxpayers. The second thing that I would focus on, and I mentioned this earlier as well, is how much are we spending and why, and to what end? And you mentioned Sunset. There are many things that happen on college campuses that take on a life of their own. What is it we can do? And then the last piece that I would say is, Regent Hicks acknowledged this as well, are there abilities to gain synergies from looking at it system-wide versus looking at each institution doing the same thing? Are there things in commonality that can get us greater return on purchasing if we share that ability? So my interest is increasing access and affordability and transparency. I would hope the techniques we use will broaden our horizons into what's possible.
So what's more important to you, the reputation or results?
Reputation.
The reputation of the system, or dealing with an issue or scandal or whatever it may be that is there. I mean, does it look away and hope it goes away, or is it address and whatever happens, that's what we need to?
I think we're only as strong reputationally as our results. I think we're only as strong reputationally as our awareness of our internal issues that need to be addressed. I think we're only strong reputationally if we're transparent. And so I don't know if anything can have reputation unless we ourselves don't root out the issues that can plague us in the future.
Okay, and you're on the board of Notre Dame, right? And how long have you done that?
I got an honorary doctorate in May of 2001, and that's the first time I was able to shake hands with someone from Notre Dame. But I grew up in a Catholic family whose father adored Notre Dame, as he called it. And so I've been aware of Notre Dame since I was a baby. But I didn't formally get to know anyone at Notre Dame until 2001.
So when did you join the board?
Shortly after the administration, they voted me in May of 2009, so I think my first board meeting was the fall board meeting in 2009.
So that'll be 5, 6 years. And what would you, in your time there, and actually how big is that board?
Private college boards are fairly large in that once you come on, you don't come off. And so we have trustees emeriti, probably about 30. And then those of us that are active trustees, we vacillate 25 to 35.
And then what would you sort of point to as your 3 big achievements in the time that you've been on that board? What have you done? What have you contributed to Notre Dame since you've been there?
So I would say the first thing that I was tasked with was helping the university understand how to be less parochial, no pun intended, When you come to South Bend and your experiences in South Bend and it's across the campus, 95% of our students live on campus, inclusive of graduate students. How is it that we could bring a global perspective to the educational experience of those students? And so when I was brand new on the board, I was tasked with bringing the best lessons I learned from my role in the administration and understanding how other campuses were bringing globalization or an international dimension to the student experience. The second thing that I've worked on is on the affordability front. A private college is very expensive, and we want to attract at Notre Dame the best and brightest across the United States, and helping the university's financial aid office understand how we could package together student offers that minimize the loan burden on students, particularly for the disadvantaged students. And the third area where I think I've been helpful is I'm a member of the Academic Affairs Committee, and the provost and the president have asked me to help the university increase its research capacity to perhaps someday earn an opportunity to sit among the top tier of the national research universities.
What's the graduation rate in 4 years at Notre Dame?
Well, can I say that we have 24 sports programs, and 22 of our sports programs have 100% graduation, and the other two sports have between 96 and 98.3. And so if that's the graduation rate of our athletes, you know that you're not going to be surprised by the number that I'm going to give you. Within 6 years, we've got a 99% graduation rate. But remember, we've got 7,000 to 8,000 undergraduates, and then the rest are graduate students.
Sure. In Texas, the 6-year graduation rate ranges from 76 at UT Austin, I believe, 12%.
But I would tell you, I think we can aspire, but as Regent Hicks mentioned earlier, we have a different circumstance at the University of Notre Dame than we do here. We also have to remember that it's a highly selective college, and so when students get to Notre Dame, many of them have even already earned college credit. And so I think we can learn from the experience there, but I think it's going to need to inform what's possible here.
How do you think about admitting students who have a low probability of graduation? Is that a good idea? Is that something to be encouraged? I mean, and I think if you're thinking just about a business, well, the more customers I have, the better. So the more people I have here, if they graduate or not, that's not really my problem. I'm just here to, fill the classrooms up, get people in here, get funding, get tuition, but there's a policy objective that the state of Texas has, that the people of Texas have. That policy objective is degrees. We need, as a state, more people with degrees. We've done a good job of stealing people from other states, but we're getting to the point, or we're starting to get to the point, where we're too big. We can't do that anymore. That's not a winning strategy. It has to come from within. Is it a good idea to let people in that we know really have a very low chance of finishing?
So I want to be very careful on this. We have, in Texas, we have a percentage plan, and so we have a number of automatic admits. We also have discretionary admits, and those discretionary admits have to be under the 18 standards that are in the Texas Education Code. I worry a little bit when we say that some top kids can't succeed, because the two things that I've seen research on. Number one, kids that rise to the top, even when it's low curriculum, over time, if they have the right supports, can succeed. And so what I would say to you is I'd rather turn it around a little bit to say, as students are entering my campus, can I benchmark and understand their readiness? And then how do I connect them with my offerings to ensure that that readiness is not frustrated by putting them in a circumstance where they can't succeed, but instead, and we have terrific programs at some of our member institutions that do just that. Students, as soon as they're admitted, walk in, we get their math readiness, and we're able to understand how do we sequence them so that they do have that graduation rate. So I'd rather see it the other way, which is rather than say we're admitting kids that can't succeed, I want to acknowledge that even kids that don't have access to rigorous curriculum that will rise to the top at their high school have the potential. It's in the university's best interest to understand exactly where they are, meet them where they are, and then get them to where they and the state need them to be at the end of 4 years.
Well, on some level, are you saying that aptitude versus achievement, hey, they have aptitude to succeed, and we think we can help them get there, and I'm fine with that. But I think admitting someone who doesn't have the aptitude, who's the winner from that one?
Well, I don't know that that's possible in the scenario that we have here in Texas legally, but I mean, if I were to separate myself from Texas, I would say to you, absolutely, we're not doing that student a disservice. Then we're not doing that student a service in the event that we know they can't succeed at our campus.
Okay.
Because here in Texas, we do have the aptitude, and we also have a little bit of the, what we call the non-cognitive, which is the persistence ability. We have the ability to see both of those.
Yeah, and I should, in full disclosure, tell you that I did call another member of the board at Notre Dame about you over the weekend, and they were effusive in their praise of you.
Who do I owe? Thank you.
Maybe I got the one person.
I want to know who he or she is.
Anyway,
I'm sure he'll be transparent, Ted.
You're allowed to God's ears.
No, but they said you were a hard worker, that you were fair, and you were exactly the kind of person that the system needs. And clearly we all want a harmonious board. We want a harmonious board of regents at the University of Texas. What has been your experience at the Notre Dame board, and what do you see, in the interest of harmony, working together, in my own time in the Texas House and Texas Senate, I've seen where these chambers are ultimately about solving problems, disagreements about distribution of money, extraction of money, creating programs. I mean, and they solve programs, and it's interesting to see how much more rancorous the House is than the Senate. And there is a culture of working together, even across parties, and getting things done. How do you see what you worked in at Notre Dame versus the Board of Regents here for the Texas system?
So I haven't sat in a Board of Regents meeting, so I'm not sure, but certainly I've read what's going on here. I think the important thing to remember when you join any board, and whether it's Notre Dame or any of my public company boards, you have to assume that everyone that walks in the door has the best interest of that institution. I find when you walk in with that mindset, you listen differently. And I've always been told that I'm a good listener, that I advise team goals. And if confirmed, I would commit to you that I would bring into this opportunity that same mindset, which is we're all committed to the best interest of the institutions that we serve, the taxpayers that are putting us in a position to get that. And I will listen attentively to all my colleagues, and I will work with them to advance the missions of the various institutions that we're asked to support.
Earlier you were testifying that you needed to separate out your work from the job we're asking you to do here. Why are you doing that?
Why am I separating?
Why should you do that?
Well, because conflicts of interest are never good. And my obligation is to do what's right by the institution that I'm serving. Why am I here today and willing to put myself in this position? Is that your question?
Actually, you've already answered it, but you can answer that question too.
Okay.
No, but why are you here?
Why am I here?
Yeah.
I'll never forget the first time I came to Austin. My father drove me up here, and I was so excited. And I turned around, like, "Daddy, why aren't you racing up to catch up with us? Why aren't you here with us?" His eyes were closed, and he said, "It is so beautiful." And I've told that story often, more because I wanted kids to see that a daughter wanting to make her father proud by earning a degree here. That was my mission at that point in time. I lost my father many years ago, and I'm so grateful that I continue to learn from him, because shame on me. After my visits with each of you over the last 3 weeks, I've reflected. Yes, it's true that I should remember the enthusiasm of someone wanting to make her father proud by being a graduate of the university. But my father looked at this institution, and he not only appreciated what was here, but he saw possibilities. Possibilities for his daughter, possibilities for his children. And I owe this state such a great deal for giving me the platform that I have. And I'm putting myself here because I owe my parents and I owe taxpayers in Texas the ability for more and more children to have the opportunity that I had. And if confirmed, I want to appreciate what we have, but I want to unleash the potential of the institutions that make up the University of Texas system.
Have you ever had any business relationship with the University of Texas?
I have, starting in starting in the spring of 1974. I was an orientation advisor. I got compensated.
Okay.
Somebody noticed me. I worked in the director of admissions office when I was an undergraduate. When I came back to get my MBA, I was offered another position in the admissions office to help the university. And so I was fortunate that one of my jobs was on campus. Through the years, I've had honorariums for speaking opportunities. I've had expenses reimbursed. And then when I left the administration, I submitted a proposal to the university to see if they'd be interested in understanding how they could better serve citizens of Texas and yet produce a more STEM-capable STEM-capable population, and did some work for 15 to 18 months with the university and was compensated for that.
And when was that again?
2000, right after we lost the national championship, so 2010-ish to early 2011.
And who were you working for?
I was working for the Office of the President.
Okay. And can you flesh that out a little more for me?
Sure. I had seen a Kauffman Foundation report that showed that Texas readiness for economics-wise was dropping, and the reason for it dropping was the percentage of our citizens in the state of Texas that had STEM-capable degrees or degrees that would work in the knowledge economy. The literacy of our adult working population was slipping, and I had a lot of experience in understanding how to attack that. And so I asked the university whether they'd be interested in me doing an assessment of the University of Texas at Austin's ability to meet families and students where they were and get them through the university with a STEM degree in a defined period. And so I did an assessment of the readiness for the university and made some recommendations.
And you were reporting to who again?
I didn't report to anybody. I did a proposal, and I worked for the Office of the President and delivered my recommendations on that.
And the president was?
Bill Parks.
Okay, right. Just making sure we keep track. Okay. And just, you've testified that you can't see a way that you could use your position of regent to forward Common Core. If you were to come up with a way.
I couldn't, it's illegal in Texas.
Okay. So can I get a commitment from you that you will not use this to forward Common Core?
I don't know.
Okay. Thank you for taking the time to answer all these difficult questions, and we're fortunate to have you willing to serve. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Taylor. Before I go to Senator Schwartz, let me make one quick administrative announcement to the senators and staff. I've given a warning order to my chief of staff, and I don't know how much longer we'll spend with Mrs. Tucker. We still have Mr. Beck to go. So we've got plans for lunch for the committee to be properly fed chow. You know, soldiers always eat before officers do, so we'll make sure that the staff and the senators get a chance to eat. But those plans are in preparation right now, so that if you have other plans, if you've got plans for eating, Senator Short, I'm more than happy to include you in that count as a guest of the committee. No. But we're doing so. And with that, let me go to Senator Schwartz.
Thank you, Ms. Fisher. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I had just a few brief questions in reference to your time as Undersecretary. You were Undersecretary during the financial crisis of 2008, 2009, and in that role, there was a massive expansion of the federally subsidized direct loan program. And I'm reading here, in which the Treasury provides the capital and the taxpayers bear the default risk and the interest rate risk. 2008, 2009, the volume went from 21 billion to 2009, 2010 to 40 billion. That's a fairly dramatic jump because I guess our private institutions weren't lending because of the freeze of our capital markets at that time. Do you in any way believe that was the beginning of easy access to student loans and debt that has cycled now to where we have $1.2 trillion in student debt?
No. What happened was in early 2008, we started, at the time, we were doing roughly 80 billion in federal student loans. The escalation in that had started way before then. I mentioned it since the 70s. Tuition and fees have been rising at twice the level of inflation. The problem we had in 2008 was that lenders, at the time, 90% were done through the private sector.
Right.
And so we started having meetings with private sector lenders in January that said, we don't have access to cash at rates that make it, would make it possible.
FFEL program.
Right,
Yeah.
that would make it possible for us to fulfill it. And so I was faced with the dilemma that in May, families across the United States were going to get letters that said, David Beck is eligible for X number of loans, and David Beck was not going to be able to find a lender to originate that note, that loan. So what we did was we looked at what we could create with Treasury. Senator Kennedy passed legislation that would allow us for the first time ever to build a bank within the department, and we found a way to use Treasury funds to originate the loan at a rate that the private lender could execute on that loan and then securitize that loan. Those lenders were not looking to increase volume. Those lenders were looking to meet the volume that had been created by the qualification that those students had earned from the prior December's filings. So that, we didn't do anything to expand. What we did was we created a program to allow us to meet the need of the promises that had been made.
Federal government came in backstop, essentially, stepped in.
Exactly.
Keep fluidity in the market and provide for the
The way this works in the private sector is the money's made in the securitization, and there was no securitization possibility, and so we did become the backstop. I would tell you, it is one of the few TARP programs that actually make money for taxpayers. What happened after that, though, was with the mark-to-market, as the economy continued to erode in 2008, we had to create other loan purchase programs to allow our lenders to stay solvent. Our work ended in 2008, and we left in 2009. The next administration then doubled down and wanted to bring into government the government's ability to do the lending, and so private student lending went away. So our intervention ended in 2008.
The unintended consequences of government intervention has basically killed the private student loan market.
And that happened after our watch.
Do you feel that this market disruption, however, and intervention on the federal government's part that started under your supervision, however well-intentioned, created the bubble in the student loan interest and access, and now backstopping by the federal government?
No, as I said, our intent was never to have government lending do what government lending has evolved to. Our intent was to create an opportunity to meet the commitments that have been made to families across the United States. That was our sole intent. How do we get to families through 2008? What has happened since we left office is not what I would have done.
There are now 20% of student debt is now in default, close to it. Do you agree with President Obama that student debt should be absolved?
I have great concerns about the loan forgiveness programs that have been created. I have great concerns about the unintended consequences of policies that don't really take into account deep knowledge of our educational system. If we have irresponsible behavior and students take on too much debt, and then that can be forgiven,
That's not stop.
I worry for the taxpayer. I do worry that we've created a situation that's not supportable.
So that would be a no, or yes? Do you agree with President Obama's?
I don't.
Very well. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Porter. Members, other questions? Thank you, Madam Secretary, or should I say, Mrs. Tucker? What we'll do is we'll close the invited testimony portion of the hearing. What I would like to do, if I may, is release you, if I may, Mrs. Tucker. Mr. Beck, if I may I ask you to step from the witness table to the audience seats, given we have oral testimony that I'd like to have both mics available for, if I may. So if I could graciously ask you to do so, Mr. Beck, I'd appreciate it. Thank you again for joining us, Mrs. Tucker. Let me bring, I've got testimony that is both oral. I do have one. Let me ask, where is it? Mrs. Stidman?
Yes.
Veronica?
Yes.
You have both oral and written testimony? Do you have a copy of the
I
written?
just have a short statement here. That's
Okay, so you're going to provide that to us orally?
Yes.
Okay, so you don't have written testimony that accompanies your oral?
I have written testimony that you see as a summary of my board.
You're going to read the written testimony. What I'm saying is you'll have oral testimony, not an additional addendum to give the
No, I
committee.
don't.
Okay, would you then provide the clerk both the written testimony? Let me bring, if you would, Mrs. Stidham, would you please take the table? You're providing oral testimony and written for